Today we're talking about item types. There are 4 types of items you can create: regular item, key item, hidden item A, and hidden item B. Anything classified as a regular item will show up in your menu under items, and if classified as a key item, they will show up under the key item category. Hidden item A and B, however, will not show up in your inventory at all by default. Why would you want to use these? As with all things in RPG Maker, there are many different uses for these, but here's one that I came up with quickly that I don't see used a lot, which is using it as an interaction menu. You could create a plant event and have it use the select item event command when you interact with it. Now, as you can see, we have several different options for things we can do with the plant, but these aren't really commands. These are all just classified under hidden item A. In the next short, I'll give you a crash course on how to make something like this. Bonus points if you can create it on your own beforehand. So we've gone over before how you can add things like colored text or icons to your messages when you're playing through an event. But did you know that you can also apply that to skills and items in the database? As you can see right here, this is pretty standard text for a skill like this. So let's add a little bit of flair to it. All right, let's take our basic text here and we'll change it from performs a powerful attack on an enemy to deals massive damage. Also increases attack. Now what we want to do here is we want to change massive damage's color to red. So we'll do a color command here. And next to increases attack, we want to add an icon. Now, unlike the show text command, you'll not be able to right click and insert color index or icon index. But now when we look at the skill in the game, looks a lot better. Massive damage is in red and we've got a nice little icon there. Locked chests and doors are kind of an RPG staple. So let's create a treasure chest that requires a key to open it. Go to your items tab, create a new item. We'll call it chest key. You could make your key a regular item, but I prefer to make it a key item. We're going to change consumable to no because keys don't just vanish when you use them. Change your scope to none and change your occasion to never. Create your chest event. Start a conditional branch, go to page 4, go to item, and choose your key item. Create an else branch. If the party has a chest key, you want to give them a reward. If they don't, we want to show a message. This chest is locked. Also, be sure to turn your self switch on if the party opens the chest so that you can change it to an opened treasure chest. Also add some dialogue in there to show that you got the item. We'll create an NPC to give the player the item. We start out without the key. It says the chest is locked. We grab the key, and now we have a Dragon Blade. Here's an RPG Maker tip. Today is focused on comments. Make sure you're utilizing comments. Comments are so important. Sometimes you step away from a project or you're working on like a complex system or something, and comments can really help you break things up and understand what's happening at different points during the event. Comments do not affect your event in any way. They're essentially just invisible to the event. It's something only you can see. It's never shown in game, and can be very, very helpful. A good example for this can be found in the latest YouTube video I did about how to create a switch puzzle. I used a comment at the top of each of the event command lists for these switches to know which switches to change throughout the event instead of having to press OK and go back into each switch every time to check which surrounding switches are getting adjusted. In order to add a comment in your event list, go ahead and double click. It's on the first page. And it's right down here at the bottom, comment, and a text box will pop up, and all you have to do is enter what you want your comment to be. RPG Maker tip number 17. This is going to be another quick tip on some launch DLC plugins. HP consumes skill. What this plugin does is allow skills to cost HP. This is not very easily done in the base engine, and this gives you an elegant way to do that. The only thing you can customize about this is the HP color, which utilizes the same color values as your text. I'm going to take one of the default skills and add an HP cost to it. For now, we're going to use the swordsman skill, strong attack. So we want to go to the skills list, go to strong attack. In order to set the HP cost, you're going to do a less than sign, HP underscore cost, colon, and the numerical value of how much HP you want the character to lose when they use the skills. So let's just do 135 and end with a greater than sign. So we're on our battle screen here. We're going to go to special, and as you can see, it shows 135 for strong attack. Yellow is the color that was set in the plugin options. You can change that to any color you like. We're going to use it, and you can watch the character lose HP as they use the skill. Enjoy! This time I'm going to show you a quick formula that you can use to only restore a percentage of the damage that you did. Also, shout out to the RPG Maker forums and all the users there who had a ton of good info on how to do this, which brought me to this formula. First, change your damage type to HP damage, and then for your formula field, you're going to use this formula. After C equals is where your damage formula for the skill will go. Last time our damage formula was just 100, so that's what we've put here. The formula inside of the parentheses for .gain HP are how much HP you want the user to recover. Since we have divided by 2, the user would restore 50% of the damage that they dealt. If you wanted to restore 25% of the damage that you dealt, you would do divided by 4. The final C here is using your damage formula to do HP damage to the target. So don't change this. This is where your damage formula will be. And as you can see, when we use drain, we'll restore 50 health. RPG Maker tip number 4. RPG Maker MZ allows you to have players follow you when they're in your party. This looks a little weird. This character who wants nothing to do with this conversation, and this character who's talking in this direction. Let's fix that. You can turn the option off altogether, but I like having players follow you. Create some blank events and name them after the characters that are not your main character. Then go into the event that's going to trigger the cutscene, right click and insert change player followers. Turn it to off. Personally, I like to have the scene fade out, turn the followers off, and then fade back in. A nice little cutscene transition. Remember these blank events we created earlier and named after our party members? Now we can use set movement route to change our party member event graphics. Make sure during the movement route you have them face the direction that you want them to be during the cutscene. Do this for each party member event. Since you have the party members now tied to the events, you can control them individually as well. Add a little more emotion to your dialogue. Enjoy! RPG Maker tip number 13. RPG Maker MZ comes with free launch DLC, which means if you buy the engine, you get this stuff for free. The DLC comes with some pretty useful stuff, including some great plugins and some full body pictures for the base actors. I'll be showing you how to add the plugins in another video, but in order to add the full body pictures, you want to go up to Resource Manager. Once you have your Resource Manager open, you want to click Pictures because that is the type of content that the full body actors are. Then hit the DLC button. If you have not bought any other DLC for the engine, the only one you're going to see here is Basic Resources. Double click that. You'll see 2 folders listed here. One says Pictures, one is Plugins. For now, let's go into Pictures. You want to just press Control A and click Open. And now they're in your Pictures folder. I'll be doing a separate tip video for Show Picture, but now that those full body portraits are within your game files, you can go to Show Picture, and they'll be listed here for you to use. Enjoy! RPG Maker tip number 14. This is going to be a follow-up tip to tip number 13, where I showed you how to add your launch DLC resources. In this tip, I'm going to be showing you how to add your plugins. In your Steam library, right-click RPG Maker MZ, go to Manage, and Browse Local Files. Once you're in this folder, you're going to want to go into DLC, Basic Resources, and then Plugins. Press Control A and Control C to copy both of these folders. After you've copied those plugins, you're going to want to go into your game folder. If you don't know where that is, open RPG Maker MZ and open your project, click Game, and then open folder. After you've opened your project folder, go ahead and close out of RPG Maker MZ. To add your plugins, you're going to want to go to JS, go to Plugins, and then press Control V to paste the 2 folders. Now that your plugins are in your project folder, you can click Plugins. You won't see any of this here. Just click an empty space, click this button here, and you can see all your plugins are here. In the next few tip videos, I'll be showing you how to utilize some of the best plugins that come with the launch DLC. RPG Maker tip number 15. In the last tip video, I showed you how to add your launch DLC plugins to your project. In this video, I want to show off one of the menu plugins. First, click the puzzle icon in the hotbar here. If you haven't added any plugins yet, this will be blank. Just double click an empty space. When this menu comes up, click Name, go to Launch, and double click Alt Menu Screen to MZ. Make sure the status of this plugin is set to on. Go ahead and just click OK for now. Now, when you playtest your game, your menu will go from looking like this to this, which I think is much more visually appealing. You can see right in the middle here, right underneath the cursor, there's an arrow for more options, and when you go down, there's another row. That is an option that you can add in the plugin settings. Let's check those out. In the plugin settings, you can adjust things such as how many rows of commands there are and how many columns, whether you want to display character status. There's all kinds of stuff to look through in here to adjust for the menu. Enjoy! This is a follow-up to quick tip number 15. Unfortunately, there is a bug with this plugin. When you try to encounter a battle, this happens. I'm going to show you how to fix this. Open your game's project folder, go to JS, go to plugins, and then open AltSaveScreen It may ask you what program to open it in. Feel free to open it with any text editor, Notepad, WordPad, or a code editor. I need you to find this exact set of code. Most text or code editors have a search function that you can access with Control F. In order to find this particular line you need to change, type in adjust, which is adjust without the S. Yes, it is a typo, but it still functions correctly, and it will be the third option. What I want you to do is copy this entire thing, paste it right below, and instead of it saying sprite gauge, we're going to change it to sprite name. After you've changed it to sprite name, simply save it, and now when you try to go into a battle, it works perfectly. Enjoy! We've gone over before how to change the text color in your RPG Maker game. Those colors are based on a specific palette within the files of your game. What that means is that it can be changed. To find this file, go to your project folder, then image, then system, and open window.png. Now, when you insert a color index, it pulls from this palette. I'll go ahead and put the numbers up on the screen for you now. A few different reasons you might want to change this around to your liking. Number one is, I'm not really sure why there are 5 shades of green in various areas on this color palette. Very strange to me that it doesn't just go in numerical order. Also, maybe you want to take one of the colors and make a gradient with it. Just be careful that you do not change the dimensions of the color tiles because you will affect the rest of the system image, and that will cause some wackiness in your games. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips. Today I'm going to show you how to use a launch DLC plugin that will allow you to make cool things like this. This is a launch DLC plugin called TextPicture. Be sure to add it and make sure it's turned on. And what this add-on does is it takes any text that you type in, including icons and colors like you would under show text normally, and turns it into a picture that you can adjust with show picture. So let's create our text. You can see I've used a color and an icon here. Now I just use show text to get the color index and icon index. So we're going to copy all this, delete the show text, and we're going to go to plugin command. Under plugin name, choose text picture. For the text value, paste what you just put in under show text. All you have to do now to show it as a picture is open show picture and do not choose an image. The settings you see here for picture 1 will be the settings for your text. And then with a little show picture magic, you can create something like this. Now this can be used a lot of different ways, but an example would be this little item notification and this little level indicator that I have on the bottom of the screen. RPG Maker tip number 11. This is going to be a follow-up tip from tip number 9, which showed you how to change the self switch of an event from a different event. As you can see, we have a sword and a red button here. When we interact with the sword, it's going to turn self switch A on. When self switch A is on, the sword's going to be gone. In the event for the red button, it's going to check to see if the sword self switch is on. If it is, it's going to turn its own self switch on, which will change the button to pressed. In this event, we use a conditional branch to run this script call. Make sure when you create the conditional branch, you click the create else branch. The script call is the same as it was from tip number 9, map ID, event ID, self switch or checking. The first set of events after if are what you want to happen if the self switch is on. The else set of events is what you want to do when the switch is not on. If it's on, we want the button to be pressed. If it's not, we want the text to show sword is not pulled. Testing it out, we can see sword is not pulled. Pull the sword, that turns its self switch on. We go to the red button is pressed. Enjoy. Let's take a look at the scroll map event command. Scroll map is an event command that will allow you to move the camera to another part of the map without moving the player. Using scroll map is pretty straightforward. Choose the direction you would like the map to scroll in, how many tiles in that direction you would like it to scroll, and how fast you would like the scroll to happen. You can also use wait for completion to make sure that the player can't move while the scroll map is happening. This is pretty useful in a number of ways, but I think its most common use is in a cutscene like this. In this cutscene, we'll have this character talk to this one, then we'll have the map scroll up 4 and left 9 so that you can see a conversation between these two. And here's what the scroll up commands look like for reference. Now let's watch this cutscene play out. This is some nice flair to add to your cutscenes and isn't limited to just that use. It can be used for a lot of other creative things as well. RPG Maker tip number 12. I like to add passive skills to my games so that the player has some stuff to do that's not battling, which you see a lot of in turn-based RPGs. This here is called Keen Eye, and what Keen Eye does is allows you to see these little sparkles here. This is the game I'm currently working on, which you can find multiple dev diaries for on my YouTube channel. You can see there is no red sparkle here like there was when we were looking at the map editor. When you grab this green sparkly item here, it's going to give you some Keen Eye experience, and when you get enough experience, you're going to level up, allowing you to see more rare items in the overworld. For the sake of this example, we're going to pretend like we're 1 experience away from leveling up. We grab this item. It says Keen Eye level 0. That's a bug. Don't worry, I'll fix it. You see the little notification in the top left that says Keen Eye +1. Now, since that was 1 experience away, we can go over here and there's the red sparkle. We found 30,000 bits. Yay. Enjoy. Let's go over how to show character portraits during show text. Create your event and then use the show picture event command. Click image and select your character portrait. Use quick setting to place it where you want it to be. You can adjust this later if needed. Now you can add the text for that character. After the show text command, you want to use erase picture so that the picture can be cleared for the next character's portrait. There's a variation of this where we can have it become darker instead and have the character image of the one speaking light up. We'll talk about that in the next one. Now repeat the process for the next character. Use show picture, select the image, and quick setting where you want it. Then add your text and erase the picture afterwards. Here's a bonus pro tip. If you're using the same picture number, you really only need 1 erase picture at the end of the event. If different pictures use the same number, they'll just overwrite the previous picture with that number. And that's one way to add character portraits to your text. Let's highlight our character portraits from the last video when they speak. Create 2 common events. Call them Highlight Picture 1 and Highlight Picture 2. In Highlight Picture 1, use Tint Picture. Make sure your picture number is 1 and that all the color values are set to 0. Set the duration to 1, uncheck Wait for Completion, and click OK. After this, create another tint picture, this time for picture 2. You can click the Dark Preset button for an easy darkening, or you can adjust the values lower yourself if you'd like for an even darker tint. Again, duration 1, uncheck Wait for Completion. We're done with Highlight Picture 1, now on to Highlight Picture 2. This will be the exact same process but with the picture numbers flipped. Simply copy and paste the events from Highlight Picture 1 and change the first tint to Picture 2 and the second tint to Picture 1. Now, in your event, you can just call the common event that highlights the picture of the person talking. Simple as that. Another pro tip, create a common event to erase the pictures when the conversation is done as well. Okay, let's talk about fade out and fade in. These are pretty self-explanatory commands. Fade out fades the screen to black. Fade in brings it back in. There's just a few things to know. You always have to have a fade in after a fade out. If you fade out and do something like transition to another map or anything like that, it's just going to be a black screen. You always have to fade the screen back in. The fade out and fade in can be pretty quick. It seems like it's only like half a second, but you can change that if you add a wait command in between them. This would be good if you wanted to add like a dramatic effect to the scene, maybe give the player just a little bit longer to digest what just happened. The last thing to note here is that if you're going to do any kind of visual change, you should do it while the screen is faded out. If you do it when the screen fades back in, the player is going to see that. So if you're adding or removing party members, if you're changing party graphics, if you're changing map graphics, you want to do that while the screen is faded out so that that change has already happened when the screen is faded back in. Do you ever have just a massive chunk of eventing that contains things like dialogue disposition, item acquisitions, variable changes, graphic changes, transfer events, the list goes on. Sometimes, towards the end of that giant chunk of eventing, you have a small fight sequence choreographed out and you want to test it, but you don't want to sit through the 30 minutes of cutscenes you just created. Lucky for you, there's a way to do that. Go to your event page, highlight everything you would like to skip, right-click, and then hit the toggle skip option. You can also just highlight all the commands you want to skip and press Control and /. And voila! Now everything inside the skip section will indeed be skipped in that event. To turn the skip off, simply click the block of commands and use the shortcut again, or right click and hit toggle skip once more, and the event contents will be back to normal. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips. RPG Maker tip number 10. If you hit F9 while playtesting your RPG Maker game, you'll bring up the Debug menu. In reality, what this is basically an interface that allows you to turn switches on or off or change variables from this menu here instead of having to wait for them to happen in-game. A good use for this would be this gate that I have here, which will not allow the player to move on unless a variable called initial gear hits 3. Initial gear will hit 3 once I examine each of these 3 sparkling objects. I can skip this portion of the playtest by bringing up the debug menu, going to the variable that I want to change, go left to take it down or right to take it up. I need it to be 3 to move past here, so let's set it to 3. We should be able to move right through here. And there you go. This works with variables and switches. So it's very, very useful. You cannot use it for self switches, which we talked about in my last tip video, but it's still incredibly useful. Enjoy.
If you're new to RPG Maker, you might not be familiar with the X and Y coordinates of the map or in event actions. The top left corner of every map starts at 0x and 0y. You can find the X and Y of any tile by mousing over it while you're in map mode or clicking it in the event mode. The x-axis runs across the map horizontally and the y-axis runs up and down the map vertically. Now that you know this, when you look at something like the jump command, it's a little easier to figure out where your character would be after the jump. Negative x goes towards the left and positive x goes towards the right, while negative y goes towards the top and positive y goes towards the bottom. So in this example, if you wanted to jump down and to the left to this tile, you would set your jump coordinates as -2 for x and +1 for y. You can also use the x and y coordinates in other cool and interesting ways that we'll go over in the future. Let's use item types to make an interaction menu using select item. Go to items in the database and create your commands. Make sure you use hidden item A or B item types. For this example, we'll be focusing on the burn command. You could use show choices, but in select item, you can create as many of these commands as you want. Inside of the event you want the interaction menu displayed for, use the select item command. Then select hidden item A or B depending on which one you used for your commands. The variable displayed stores the item ID of the item that the player chose. For instance, the burn item ID is 35. So when the select item menu appears and the player chooses burn, that variable will now be 35. Create a conditional branch for that variable being 35, add a little fire animation to the branch, and goodbye little plant. All you need to do now is add a conditional branch for the item ID of each command, and you've got an interaction menu. Let's create a note item that allows the player to physically view a note and then press confirm to close it. Create a common event, call it show note. Inside this common event, use show picture to display your note. Place the note wherever you'd like on the screen. After show picture, create a loop. Inside the loop, create a conditional branch that checks to see if the confirm button is being triggered. Inside of this conditional branch, use erase picture and enter the picture number of your note. Then add a break loop command. During your loop, but after your conditional branch, make sure you add a 1-frame wait to help prevent lag for other parallel processes on slower machines and browsers. Create your item. Decide how you want the item to behave and change it accordingly. Now have your item call your show note common event. And that's it. Now when the player uses the item, the note will appear and will not disappear until the player presses the confirm button. The first time that I played Final Fantasy VII, double cut was my favorite and also my most powerful materia. So let's recreate that in RPG Maker. Open the database, go to your armors tab, create a new armor, we'll call it double cut materia. We'll change the equipment type to accessory, pick out a nice icon. I like this yellowish thing here. It looks kind of like materia actually. We're going to make sure that the armor has an armor type. We'll just click general armor. And now you're going to come over to the right, delete this parameter and add a new one. Go to the attack tab and click attack times plus. The number that you put in this field is how many additional times to attack. So if you put in 1, you will attack 2 times. 1 for the initial attack, 1 for the extra attack. If you put in 2, you'll attack 3 times. For this example, we're going to just put in 1. Let's go ahead and equip it to our main character here. And now you'll see when the character attacks, he attacks twice. You can do a little more with party followers than you might think. Using a very simple script call, you can actually set a specific location for your player followers. Here's the script call at the top of the screen. All you have to do is take that snippet, add it to the script event command, and change just a couple of things. Index is which follower you want to set the location of, and it starts at 0. So the main character doesn't count. The second party member will be index 0, the third will be index 1, and the fourth will be index 2. Next to set position, you want to change X and Y to the tile coordinates you want the follower to be located to, and that's it. Now you can relocate your player followers anywhere on the map. Just keep in mind that when you move the follower, once your main character starts moving, the follower's pathing will have it try to rejoin you.
Event triggers. Important. Let's go over them. The action button trigger is exactly what it sounds like. The event contents will execute when the player presses the action button in front of or on that event. Player touch causes the event to trigger when the player touches the event by running into it or stepping on it. The event touch trigger is very similar, but instead works when the event touches the player. Auto run will continuously run once the event appears or you are on the map the event is contained on, and will not allow for player input during the execution of the event contents. And finally, parallel process will cause the event to continuously run like auto run, except this will allow the player to move and do other things during the event. This will also allow events to run simultaneously alongside that event. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips.
I recently talked about set event location, and I wanted to talk about a particular option I like within it. You can set the location of the event directly or with variables, but you can also exchange location with another event. Let me show you how I'm currently using this in my game. I have something that drops from the ceiling and a shadow event that helps it look like it's dropping. This block that drops can be moved around. In my game, it's understood by this point that leaving the room will reset the items inside. However, if I leave the room and come back in, the block that dropped returns to its original event position at the top, which is what RPG Maker does with events when you transfer to other maps, and it's a few tiles above the shadow. This makes it a little inconsistent looking for the player. So under the event page that resets the spawns in the room, I just have this block event switch locations with the shadow event, and that solves this problem. In the recent movable object video, I put a simple movement route command inside a common event. That one-line movement route could have just gone into the individual event for the movable object. The reason I did that is what I want to talk about now. Common events are exactly what their name describes. Events that are common throughout your game that you'll be using several times. The reason that you make something like this a common event is so that whenever you edit that common event, it applies to all the events that are using it. Let's say I decided to add a mechanic for movable objects that requires you to have the skill Strength before you can move it. If I had done the movement route inside each individual movable object, going back and adding that mechanic into every event page would take forever. But since it's in a common event, all I have to do is add the conditional branch that requires the skill to the common event, and it'll apply to every movable object that uses that common event.
I missed a lot of RPG Maker iterations. I used the engine quite a bit in my teenage years, hanging out in discussion boards, trying to learn and create as many things as I could. As someone whose last RPG Maker before MZ was XP, I asked myself, what's one thing I could tell someone like myself to help them get reacquainted or learn the finer details of the engine now? And it's this: Tooltips. This engine does a fantastic job utilizing tooltips, and they were one of the greatest sources of information for me to catch me up on what I missed or I just forgot. If you're ever looking at something on the event screen or in the database or really anywhere and you don't understand it, just hover over it with your mouse and you'll get a somewhat detailed snippet of information about the category or option. A lot of what I show in my tip videos can be found in these tooltips. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips.
RPG Maker tip number 3. This reward dialog looks a little vanilla.
Let's fix that. On your event screen, edit the text. In order to insert an icon, use \I and then create a bracket. Inside the bracket, right click, insert icon index. Then choose your icon. We'll choose the longsword. Looks good. There's one more thing we could change. Let's change the color of the longsword text. In order to change color, do \C and then create more brackets. Inside the bracket, right click, go to insert color index and choose your color. \C and then 0 to take it back to white. Otherwise, if you leave it this way, all your text will be purple. Now that we've added a color change that takes it back to 0, bam, there. I think that looks much better. Enjoy.
All right, comments. Let's talk about why they're important. After taking a brief hiatus from this game, I came back to work on the custom battle system, and this is just a mess. There's a lot of variables being changed, switches being turned on, pictures being shown, and while I could go through here and just look at it step by step to relearn it, what would really help me to catch up where I left off would be comments. If you've done any sort of programming, you know how important comments are. Now that I've added comments, I can kind of see at a glance, step by step, what each section of the event flow does. It's much easier to understand this way. For me personally, this also kind of works out as like a planner. Sometime I'll just add steps in comments and then put the events in between the steps. If you have a lot of complex event flows or custom systems, I highly recommend using comments to keep your event flows organized. Let's talk about finding inspiration to continue to work on your game. I often, and let me stress often, find myself getting completely obsessed working on my RPG Maker project for 2 or 3 days, and then my motivation to work on it just tanks. It's not that I don't have ideas or anything, I just get distracted by other games and get overwhelmed with the amount of things there are to do in my project. So if you're like me, here's something I do to help me get motivated again. If my game is inspired by a particular series, usually playing that game will get me out of my rut. For example, my current game is inspired by 2D Zelda in some aspects, so right now I'm playing through the GBC titles. Often the joy and nostalgia I get from playing these games will give me some energy to work on my own project and might even give me a few ideas. Simple and somewhat obvious, but effective. Let me know some of your favorite ways to get inspired in the comments. To finish out our Drain series, I'm going to show you how to create a skill that costs HP to use. As a quick note, we are using a plugin to do this, which is included in the Launch DLC plugins. If you need to know how to add the Launch DLC plugins to your game, I have another tip showing you how to do that. And the plugin that you want is HP Consume Skill. The only adjustable parameter in this plugin is the HP color, which will show in the menu when you go to select the skill. The value would be similar to if you used it in the show text command. All you need to do to make a skill cost HP is make sure this plugin is on and copy this note into the note section of your skill. For instance, let's change Drain's damage back to 100, and let's say we want it to cost 50 HP. So we'll take this and change it to 50. And now when we go to use the skill, you'll see right here that it costs 50 HP. And when we use it, we lose 50 HP.
If you want people to play your RPG Maker game, avoid making this mistake. Hello, I'm Alex. Hello, Alex, I'm Robot. What's happening, Robot? There's an evil man burning the village. We must stop him. Okay, cool. Okay, that was a bit of a dramatization, but you get my point. Nothing will make someone uninstall your game faster than poorly formatted dialogue. Make sure you're using capitalization, punctuation, anything grammatically possible to make your dialogue look better than this. Poorly formatted dialogue kind of says to the player, I didn't care enough to format this, so you shouldn't care enough to play it. There's also more you could do for the actual content of your text, but that's a separate video. Hit the like button for more RPG Maker news and tips. Let's go over event options, as the engine calls it. There are 4 of them, and they're all useful in their own way. Walking means that the character will use the walking animation on their sprite sheet while they move forward or backward. As you can see here, the top sprite is just scooting along while the bottom is actually stepping forward. The stepping option means the character will use the moving animation while they are not moving. They kind of jog in place like our energized friend here. Direction fix makes it so that even if you interact with the event, it will not turn around to face you. It will stay stuck in the same direction regardless. And finally, through will allow the character to go through obstacles that are normally impassable or other characters that are on the same level as it. Kind of like this character just walking through the box here. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips. Hopefully I can make this quick. We're going to be talking about event priority, and we're going to be talking about it in reference to the player and the player graphic to make it a little easier to understand. Below character means that if the event moves into the player, the event image will show up underneath the player graphic. As you can see in this example, the event graphic is going right underneath the player here. Same as characters puts the event on the same level as the player. Normally, that means if it collides with the player on this level, it can't pass through it unless certain options are checked. Above character puts the event on, you guessed it, the topmost layer above the player, meaning there's no preventative collision. The event just goes right over you. If you all would like some more specifics on this, please let me know, but otherwise, like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips.
Control variables is arguably the most powerful event command in RPG Maker, with show picture being a close second. In the next few tips, I'm going to be showing you different types of data you can store in variables and what that data might be useful for. Today, let's start with the basics. At the top of the command, you choose the variable or range of variables that are storing the information. You can then set it directly to whatever information you choose on the bottom portion, but you can also do some other things with it. You can add, subtract, multiply, and divide by the operand you set at the bottom. You can even divide by the operand and store the remainder. All variables will start at 0 unless you indicate otherwise. For example, let's create a variable called I'm number 1. Since we haven't done anything to it, it currently equals 0. We're going to select add and type the number 1. Now the variable I'm number 1 is 1.
When it comes to movement options for an event, you have movement type like fixed or random, but today I want to go over two of the other options that are easy to get mixed up: speed and frequency. Speed is how fast an event will move from one tile to the next. As you can see in the example, the NPC at the top is set to ×4 faster, while the NPC at the bottom is set to ×4 slower. Frequency is how often an event will move from one tile to the next. In this example, both NPCs are set to normal speed, but the NPC at the top has its frequency set to highest, and the NPC at the bottom has its frequency set to lowest. To sum things up, speed is how fast an event moves, frequency is how often an event moves. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips.
Some of the coolest moments in RPGs are when an NPC character decides to join the party and fight with you. Having guest party members like this can really make the world feel more alive, and that the people in it have their own intentions and personalities outside of the party that the player is constantly traveling with and making choices for. Luckily for us, this is very easy to do in RPG Maker. Create your NPC character, their stats, their skills, and even give them a custom class if you want to. Then all you have to do to make them act on their own is go to traits and add the special flag Auto Battle. This will make the character with this trait battle on their own. This special flag can also be used in other things like a specific class or piece of equipment. As an example, you could use it to make a berserker class that fights on their own. Do you ever get tired of hitting the playtest button over and over again? This tip will admittedly not save you a lot of time, but it's convenient functionality nonetheless. You can use F5 inside the playtest window to refresh your playtest. Let's say you want to move some things around, maybe add a player NPC or a treasure chest, something like that. Make your changes and then make sure that you save. It's important that you save, or else this refresh shortcut won't work. After you've saved, you can press F5 and you'll see all of your changes reflected in the playtest window. This might not do anything for some people, but for me it's nice because, sometimes I've got it in a full screen window and I just get annoyed having to close the window, start it, close the window, start it. Now you can just press F5. All right, let's create an object you can push. Create a comment event, call it Pushable Object or whatever you'd like really. In the comment event, create a movement route and have it move away from player. Make sure you have skip if cannot move checked and that this event is the target. Now let's create our event. This will apply to any other pushable object you want to make as well. In the event, select your object graphic and set the event trigger to player touch. Make sure that the event priority is set to same as characters. Now for the event contents, all you're going to do is have it run your pushable object comment event. That's it. Now you have an object that you can push. This can be used for a lot of tried and true puzzle style mechanics. Show choices allows you to have up to 6 options and will execute the contents of those options when you choose them. What if you want more than 6 options? Then we'll use the jump to label command. Create a label at the top of your choices and call it starting choices. Then for your 6th option, call it something like more choices. Under the more choices branch, create another show choices command with your extra choices, but for the first one, we'll call it previous choices. Under the previous choices branch, choose jump to label and jump to starting choices. Be sure to add the same text for your choice dialog right underneath more choices. Now, as you can see, we can bounce back and forth between our 2 sets of choices. Labels can be used in lots of creative ways for all sorts of things. Enjoy! I can't believe that I didn't know this, and now I have to tell you about it. To me, one of the biggest atrocities RPG Maker committed going from MV to MZ was removing the frame-by-frame animation system present in MV in pretty much every RPG Maker beforehand, replacing it with these pre-made effects here animations and reducing a lot of the agency you had to make custom animations inside of the engine. Turns out you can still access this old animation screen inside of MZ. Go to animations in the database, right-click an empty space and click Create MV Compatible Data. Now you can use the old animation system and you can even import the animations from MV into your MZ project. For today's tip, we're going to do a little bit of game theory. Most RPGs have an offensive magic character normally known as a sorcerer, sorceress, wizard, wizardess, or something along those lines. Generally, you build them to be a glass cannon. They output high amounts of damage, but also take a lot of damage due to their low defensive capabilities. This keeps them somewhat balanced. One thing I like to do is give them a small amount of passive MP regeneration since they'll never really be attacking. They'll pretty much only be using their magic, and this will help the player not have to spam MP recovery items constantly. Another mechanic I like for magic users is mastery, which would give you more damage for a spell the more that you use it. Let me know in the comments how you like to build your offensive magic characters. Set event location is a command that I think you'll find yourself using a lot over your time with RPG Maker, and allows you to specify a location that it instantly moves the event to. Here's an example of a way to use this. There's a ghost here that wants us to chase it around. Every time we talk to the ghost, we have the event transfer it to a random location using set event location. This is much more simple than other ways to do this, like using multiple events or a movement route that changes the opacity of the sprite. Instead, you can just use this one event and command to move the event around. This is just one of many examples for this command, and I encourage you to play around with set event location as you'll no doubt use it in your dev journey. RPG Maker tip number 16. This will be a quick viewer request on how to import tilesets. The first thing you need to do is go to your resource manager. Make sure you go into the Tilesets category. Let's just say that we purchased a world tileset. You want to go into DLC. Inside of DLC, you'll see the names of any resource packs that you've bought through Steam for RPG Maker MZ. For the sake of example, we'll go to the Remake Map resource pack. Within this directory, somewhere in there, you should find a folder called Tilesets, usually under the image folder. There's image and tilesets, and then you want to either choose all of them if you want to import all, or just the select few that you want. For the example here, we'll just import the world tileset, and now you can see they're at the bottom of the list. It does not end there though. Now we have to add the tileset into our database, so go ahead and click database and go down to the tilesets tab.
The next thing you want to do, change maximum, increase this to whatever you want. Let's just say 10. Okay. And then now click in one of those empty tileset listings. Let's name this tileset world map. Each one of these categories is pretty self-explanatory. The only one that might be a bit confusing is animation. Animation is something like the tileset that has water on it, for instance, where the water actively moves while you're on that map. Some of the DLC will come with this already numbered for you. For instance, we're going into the A2 category and you see world A2. The next one is world B, so go B, and you'll see world B. Some may not be pre-sorted for you, so you may have to choose to the best of your ability which fits in each category. This is getting into something a little more advanced, but it's definitely necessary to do. You want to make sure you set passage and directional passage for each of the tile sets. The passage category tells the engine the passability of a tile. Circle being a tile that you can walk on, X being a tile that you can't walk on, and star being a tile that you can walk underneath, meaning the player sprite would go underneath that tile. Directional passage indicates which direction you can move when you're on top of a tile. For instance, our bridge here, you don't want to move up or down on this bridge because the bridge goes left or right. If you move up or down, you're going to fall off the bridge. So generally you want to turn that off, and you can do this for any of your tiles. There's a lot of other useful options here that can be used as well, such as setting ladder tiles. Terrain tags are incredibly useful, even bush tiles, but those will be for a separate tip video. Now when you go to make a new map or change an existing map, under the tile set option, you can choose the tile set that you just created.
Here's something that you might not know you can do with show text. You can change a message's font size from within the show text command. Use backslash and an opening bracket to take the font size a step up. A step is 12, so if your default font size is 26, a step up would be 38. You can also use backslash with a closing bracket to take your font a step down. You can even specify a font size by typing backslash FS, presumably standing for font size, and specify the size you'd like. These could be used for comedic moments for loud or quiet characters, or if you're like me, you can use this with a plugin like Text-to-Picture to create varying text sizes for an event-only custom menu. The event command called Change Tileset is what we're talking about today. This command can be used to temporarily change the tile set of the map the player is on to a completely different one. No transferring of the player required. I say temporary because this gets reverted back to the original tile set after you transfer the player to another map and come back. I don't see this one used a lot, and while there are a few more advanced ways you could use it, a few easy mechanics come to mind. You could use it to change the tile set to a more gray and slightly fuzzy tile set with similar graphics to indicate a dream, or you could recolor it and maybe change your foliage and ground tiles to have a mechanic where you change seasons. What are some interesting things that you all have used this command for? Here we are again, preaching the good word of variables and their almost unlimited power. In the game data category, under Other, you can store party member size, steps, and playtime in a variable. Let's talk about a few examples of ways to use these. You could have a Coliseum event that only allows a certain number of party members and use a variable that contains the number of party members to check that. You could also have certain events that only occur when the player has reached a certain playtime or something that happens to the player every 2,000 steps or so. Maybe they get an HP boost or stamina every so many steps. Let me know your favorite ways to use this data in the comments. Let's create a combination style event where the player has to input a series of numbers to open a locked treasure chest or a door. Go to your event, create a new event command, and choose input number. Choose which variable you would like input number stored to, and how many digits you would like the combination lock to be. Create a conditional branch. In the conditions for this branch, set the variable for the combination lock, and have it check if the variable is equal to what you want the combination to be. Click Create Else Branch and press OK. If the combination lock is correct, we want it to turn self switch A on, which will open the door. If it's not correct, we want it to show text, "You have entered the wrong code." And now we walk up to the door, input the correct number, and it opens the door.
RPG Maker tip number 1. When using the built-in character creator, be sure if you find a character you're going to use for your game multiple times, hit this button. Save your character file as... Then, if you need to edit that character later, load... And there you go. You can make more facial expressions. You could change the color of their hair. Maybe they got older. Just make sure that you hit save again when you're done. Either overwrite the same file or create a new file if you want to then reference that one in the future and have both to be able to edit at a later date. Enjoy.
I can't believe this is still going either, but here's even more stuff that you can store inside of variables. Under game data, you can store any of an actor's stats or an enemy's in a variable. This includes HP, MP, attack, defense, that kind of stuff. Now, the things that you do with those variables are limited only by your creativity, but here's a quick made up on the fly example. You could have a skill that has a chance to strike twice based on the character's luck. Set their luck to a variable in a common event, check if it's above a certain amount, and if so, have them strike again. Just make sure you have a way to break the loop like you see here. What are some of your favorite ways to use these stats and variables? Today's tip is for a command that's a bit of a throwback to classic RPGs. Select item is an event command that gives the player a menu of the item type you choose and allows them to select one. In this example, we have a chest key whose item ID is 3. In our chest event, we'll have the player select an item from their regular items list. You can also have them select from key items and hidden items as well. It stores the item ID of the item that the character chose in a variable we called item chosen. Now we make a conditional branch that checks to see if the character chose the item with ID 3. If they do, the chest opens. Testing it, we walk up to the chest and select our chest key, and now the chest is open. RPG Maker tip number 18. This is going to be a continuation of the launch DLC plugin tips. Which save screen do you think looks better? Save screen A or save screen B? If you said B, I'm going to show you how to add this save screen to your project. Load up your plugin manager, go ahead and add a new plugin, click name, and then you want to find AltSaveScreen. Go ahead and double click that and then just click OK. There's no special parameters or anything that you have to change. It just works right out of the gate. So just hit OK. And as you can see, the save screen's been changed. I think this one looks better visually, specifically because it adds the faces at the bottom instead of the character sprites. It makes it a little more, I don't know, personal or just aesthetically pleasing. Enjoy. You want to add lore to your RPG Maker game. Big sprawling blocks of text that fill out the history and elements of your game's world. Not a lot of simple options for that. The best option, in my opinion, is show picture, but that requires some graphical prowess. Introducing the next best option, show scrolling text. Scrolling text can be great for game intros or story beats, but it can also be used as a decent avenue for showing off a lot of text at one time. It allows you to adjust the speed of the text from 1 to 8 and has seemingly no limit, at least not one that I could find. Just keep in mind that once started, the player cannot cancel out, so I wouldn't recommend checking the no fast forward option. Like, follow, and subscribe for more RPG Maker news and tips. Quick RPG Maker tip number 2. Whenever you're editing the database, if you press the F4 key and F5 key, you can go up and down respectively. So let's say you realize that your economy is completely effed, as one does when they create an RPG Maker game. Go in, let's change it up to 200, F5 to the next one, change it up to 500, F5 to the next one, change it up to 750. As you can see, whatever field you hit F5 or F4 on, that is the field that it will be in for the next item. So if you're in description and you hit F5, it goes down to description. If you're in price, you hit F5, it goes down to price, so on and so forth. Enjoy. So, you want to jump hedges like a Pokemon master. I'm going to show you how. Create your event on the ledge that you would like to jump over. Make sure you set priority to same as characters and trigger to player touch. Create a conditional branch. In this case, we want the player to jump down the ledge, so go to page 4, go to button, and change it to down. Make sure it's set to is being pressed. Press OK. Now all we're going to do here is we are going to create a movement route for the player. Select jump and Y+2. Press OK. And as you can see, you jump right over the ledge or hedge just like you would in a Pokemon game. HP and MP absorb skills have been a staple of RPGs for as long as I can remember. So let's make one in RPG Maker. Open the database, Go to your skills tab, create a new skill, we'll just call it drain. Choose your icon, we'll just go with this. Under damage type, choose HP drain or MP drain. You can use whatever formula you'd like. For now, we're just going to enter in a standard 100. And as you can see, when we use drain, we get healed the amount of damage that we did. Now, if you want the character to only restore a partial amount of the damage that they've done, that'll be a completely different formula, which I'll go over in the next tip. Here's another useful thing that you can store inside of variables. You can store the party's current gold amount in a variable. Why is this useful? This can come in handy in a situation where you have split parties with differing inventories, maybe groups of future party members that haven't met yet. This can also be useful for flashback scenes where you still allow the player to access the menu. It wouldn't make sense if you had just as much gold in a flashback as you do now. It would take away a bit of the immersion. To do this, when the flashback or party split occurs, simply store the gold in a variable and remove that amount of gold from the party. Then when the flashback is over or the party regroups, add that original gold amount back to the party. Let's continue on with our variable tips and the data that you can store within them. Today we'll talk about random numbers. Inside of the control variables command, you can specify that you would like a random number to be assigned to a particular variable and the range that random number can fall between. For instance, if we choose a range of 1 through 3, it will choose any random number from 1, 2, or 3. This can be used in a lot of ways, but one of my favorite ways to use it is creating randomized loot from treasure chests. Create a random variable and choose your range. Then for each number within that range, you can create a conditional branch that will give out particular items based on the random number.
RPG Maker tip number 5. Do you ever get tired of clicking through maps to find where you have certain events? For instance, I have items here, an item here, item here. It's everywhere. It's everywhere all over the place. Instead of going to each map, click Tools, Event Searcher. In the Event Searcher, you can search for any event name and it will pull up every map that has that event on it. So we'll search item and it shows me all the places I have items. You can use this to quickly edit any event that you need to on any map without having to click through all these different maps. Enjoy!
I can only playtest the same series of events so many times before it gets incredibly old. Here's a quick tip to help you speed up your playtests. If you hold down the Z button while your events are taking place, you can increase the speed in which they execute. Here's a laser sequence that I've made for a game I'm working on running at normal speed. Here's the same exact sequence of events, but this time I'm holding Z. As you can see, the laser travels much more quickly. Just keep in mind that this can get weird with the timing of sounds and animations, but otherwise it's a hugely helpful feature.
RPG Maker tip number 9. This script call will help you to eliminate a lot of switch bloat. Switch bloat is where you have a switch for literally every little thing that you can think of, and it gets to be hundreds and hundreds of switches long. I don't have a lot of switch bloat in this game yet, but mostly because I've started utilizing this script call. This number is your map ID. Your map ID is right here. This number is your event ID. Your event ID is right here. This letter is the self switch of that event that you would like to change, with this final part being true for on or false for off. Enjoy.
Switches are sort of the bread and butter in RPG Maker games, but there is one feature you might have missed. You can turn single switches on and off through control switches, but you can also turn a range of switches on or off. For instance, if your range is 1 to 4, it will turn switches 1, 2, 3, and 4 on or off. What this could be useful for is something like a puzzle. Instead of using an event command turning off each switch one by one, make sure all of your switches for the puzzle are in the same range, and you can use this range option in control switches. Using this instead of multiple switches in some scenarios is good practice, and hopefully it comes in handy one day. Even though RPG Maker Unite has released, RPG Maker MZ is still getting updates. The RPG Maker series Twitter page has announced a new feature coming in the next version of RPG Maker MZ. You'll now be able to preview where pictures will appear on the screen and move them around yourself, instead of having to manually enter in your X and Y coordinates. Trying to use Show Picture currently can be a bit frustrating, as you may have to constantly readjust your X and Y values to get the picture exactly where you want it to be. With no Steam release date for RPG Maker Unite on the horizon, it's great to see MZ still getting nice quality of life updates like this. Let's get into some of the more interesting information that you can store inside of a variable. The game data operand allows you to store various pieces of data from your game into a variable. For this tip, we'll be talking about the item, weapon, and armor categories. In a conditional branch, you can check whether or not the party has one of these items, but you can't check how many. That's where variables come in. Let's say the party needs to have 4 dragon bangles as a proof they passed 4 different trials. Create a variable that will store how many dragon bangles the party has. Then make a condition that checks whether or not that variable equals 4. Now the party can save the world. Here's a little secret that you can use to make some of your skills more interesting. You can add variables into your damage formulas for skills, similar to the way you would use it under show text. This allows for some really cool skill interactions. You could have a skill that gets stronger as you use it, like the one I'm testing in the example you're seeing in the background, or a skill that depends on your relationship value that you have tied into a variable. The limit is only your imagination, and let me know in the comments some interactions you all have made or want to make with variables inside of damage formulas. Here's another thing you can store inside of variables in RPG Maker MZ. You can store the actor ID of a particular member that's in your party. You can use this for a variety of things, but 2 of them in particular come to mind. You can use this to create an NPC that only wants to speak to a particular character in the party, and have the player put that character in the leader position before the NPC will start a quest, for instance. You could also use this to remember which order the party was in before switching to a flashback or alternate party. That way you can put it back together in the exact order the player had them. I'll be doing a creative mechanic on this in the future. I wasn't kidding when I said you can store a lot inside of variables. Adding to the list, we have save count, battle count, win count, and escape count. These are exactly what they sound like, and they can be used in a few different ways. The first thing that comes to mind is a custom menu system made through events, or a special key item like a journal or log that allows you to view the various things you've accomplished in your time with the game. You could also use these with conditional branches and have something like an NPC that gives you items based on how many wins you've accumulated or how many battles you've had.
RPG Maker tip number 8. Okay, this one's going to be pretty straightforward. It seems like it should be obvious, but I promise you I've seen it in streams, on YouTube, everywhere. So you can Control X and Control V copy paste your events, right? But you can just drag the events anywhere you want to go, as long as it's on the same map. Let's say you're in a situation where you coded your events backwards and you need to switch these out. Instead of doing this, copy pasting everything constantly, you could just drag them around as you need. Enjoy.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just steal all of a guest NPC's equipment and use it for your own party? That's exactly what the player is going to do if you don't add the lock equip trait for that guest NPC. When you use lock equip, it does exactly what it sounds like and does not allow the player to change or unequip anything of that type for that character. Go to your list of traits, add a new one, go to the Equip tab and select Lock Equip. Then choose what type of equipment you want to lock. Now the NPC won't be involuntarily donating their gear to the main party. I hear you all like free RPG Maker plugins. Well, here you go. Tyruswoo and their team have announced a re-grand opening of their website, tyruswoo.com, which contains several free RPG Maker MZ plugins and a few MV plugins as well. These plugins are super interesting and have some great features, from camera controls to day and night cycles to even event generation. This is a good one to bookmark for future use, and big shout out to this team for offering these plugins to the community for free. Everybody knows that having a good FPS directly correlates to having a bigger. You can pull up your in-game FPS inside of the playtest window by pressing F2. This is useful for checking to see if you have too many events, running parallel processes, or if you just have too much going on in general, as you'll start to see the FPS dip. Now, this also depends on your PC's performance, but it's still a nice tool to have in your kit to optimize your game. Horn Drill was a one-hit knockout move in Pokemon Generation 1 that had a 30% chance to instantly defeat an opponent. Let's create that in RPG Maker. Create your skill, call it horn drill, choose a cool icon, choose your animation. Under effects, add a state, choose dead, and change the percentage to 30%. And now you have a skill called horn drill that has a 30% chance to instantly defeat an opponent.
RPG Maker tip number 6. We're going to keep this one simple. If something goes horribly wrong with your event scripting, for instance, we have 2 characters with green hair on the screen here, or if you just need to check something further up, but you have obstacles in your way, kind of like these, just hold control and you can walk through anything that's normally impassable. That's a different type of wall hack. Enjoy.
RPG Maker MZ has added a quality of life feature that will save you a ton of time. In the most recent update for RPG Maker MZ, you now have the ability to skip the title screen during your playtests. This was previously achievable through the use of plugins, but is now baked right into the engine. Simple, but very useful.
RPG Maker tip number 7. If you have a structure like this that you've spent a lot of time working on and you don't really want to rebuild it all over again, just right click and drag, bring it over to where you want to put it. And there you go. This is essentially an eyedropper or a copy tool, and you can use it to save yourself a little bit of time. Enjoy.